name is Saskia Zoller. I'm from Steam Generale. We programmed this film, De Warren, because we thought it was an inspirational film for the theme most of you are working on, Deventer Lively City. The Warren is about a group of student friends, I guess, somehow. And they decided they wanted to live together. And then there came up a unique opportunity. There was a tender of a housing corporation for building your own sustainable house or flat. They decided to attend. They won. And so the film is about the whole adventure of how to build, together with a big group, a sustainable house in Amsterdam. So afterwards there will be Gerard Roemers. He is part of the film, and you can ask him all sorts of questions you have about well, the ups and downs in the process. And we think building a house for yourself with a group is participating in a city which is livable and active and vital. So we're going to play the film, but it was just warming up. Enjoy.
Feest op het centrum-eiland op Eiburg, waar wooncoöperatie De Warren, helemaal gebouwd met hout, wordt geopend met het planten van een boom.
Het begon allemaal met Konijn. Het is een hele grote groep met wie we festivalletjes, kleine evenementen, huiskamerconcertjes, veel magische momenten creëren.
Toen begonnen we te fantaseren over het idee, denk je dat we een groep konijnen naar Portugal kunnen krijgen?
En we hebben start gemaakt met een permacultuurboerderij.
Die maand was zo ontzettend leuk en het was zo fijn om met iedereen op zo'n andere manier dan normaal samen te zijn. Dat is een manier van zijn, die heb je in Nederland gewoon niet meer heel vaak.
En we hebben gezegd, voor het einde van het jaar willen we onze woongroep hebben gesticht. Toen kwam er een mailtje voorbij voor de eerste pilot wooncoöperaties van Amsterdam.
We hebben bij elkaar gezeten en gedacht, oké, nou, wie weet waar iets van? En schrijf daar maar gewoon wat over.
Om en nabij besteed je 8 miljoen euro of zo. Niemand gaat toch zo gek zijn om dat aan ons te geven.
Wat is het proost van weer in het huis? Proost.
Oh ja, proost. Shit, nou moeten we 36 woningen gaan bouwen. Dit wordt echt een belachelijk groot project.
Ik denk dat ons ontwerpproces anders is dan andere ontwerpprocessen, omdat we dit met een groep deden van 50 mensen. Wat wij heel graag wilden is dat heel speels en creatief houden.
Je komt dus zo binnen, ook vanuit de kelder.
De zoektocht naar een aannemer was veel lastiger dan die voor een architect.
Die omslag was echt een hele harde omslag. Zeker als je gewend bent om te opereren in zo'n lieve wereld waarin iedereen alles leuk vindt.
Tenzij hier een oplossing voor komt, zie ik zelf niet hoe het project door kan gaan.
Een nieuwe manier van bouwen en wonen is in opkomst.
En hier gaat het dus gebeuren.
En het leek er ook heel lang op dat het gewoon niet ging lukken.
Redelijk kapot ook.
En we gaan toch wel failliet. Als ik heel veel stress heb, dan vallen er delen uit van mijn lichaam.
We moeten er niet helemaal burn-out terug van gaan worden.
De groep was er wel altijd. We have our community complete. Welkom, nu konijntjes. Welkom, nu Warrenaren.
Do you want to live with me?
Er is geen enkele andere plek waar je zo kunt wonen met je beste vrienden.
En dat ook die gemeenschap nu een plek heeft, is de reden dat we bij elkaar kunnen blijven. Dat het niet verdwijnt.
Gerard Roemers, jij bent te zien in de film.
Ja.
Woon je er ook?
Ja, iedereen die je ziet in de film woont er.
Ah, oké. Ja. En hoe is het nu?
Super.
Ja?
Wat je op het laatst ziet, dus het is heel leuk. Samenwonen, het is een heel fijn gebouw. Superleuke groep. Dus, wat we wilden.
En er staat dat jullie inspiratie zijn voor anderen. Is dat ook zo? Of schrikken mensen?
Van de film, ja, dat kan ik beter aan het publiek vragen, dus dat weet ik niet. Maar In Amsterdam zijn er 2 andere groepen die ook echt al gaan bouwen. Dus die gaan hetzelfde doen. En nog een dozijn groepen die grond hebben gekregen of een overeenkomst om dat te krijgen als ze het plan rondkrijgen. Dus in die zin zie je daar dat het echt groeit. In Utrecht beginnen ze ermee, in Nijmegen begint het, in Eindhoven. Dus in die zin zie je wel dat het langzaam echt van de grond komt. Ja.
En dan komen ze bij jullie om lessons learned. Welke lessons learned geef je hun mee?
Het ligt heel erg aan de groep, dus het is denk ik heel verschillend per project. Eigenlijk breng je gewoon geld en organisatie en mensen en grond bij elkaar. Hè? Je bent gewoon de ontwikkelaarsrol aan het overnemen en het ligt net een beetje aan de groep waar het aan schort. Natuurlijk ook wat ze moeten overkomen. Bij de een hebben ze heel veel moeite om het qua business case rond te krijgen. Bij de ander is het juist heel lastig om zo'n grote groep. Misschien hebben ze die nog niet. Hè. Wij hadden echt een vriendengroep van 100 mensen en gewoon vooraf al te veel bewoners en te weinig woningen. Dat kan natuurlijk ook heel goed andersom zijn. Dus het kan ook zijn dat je vraagstuk zit op de sociale cohesie of de groepsvorming. Dus het is echt per geval verschillend.
Ja. Nou ja, precies. Ik denk, Brit had zoiets van, hoe werkt nou eigenlijk een coöperatie? Is dat een vraag die jullie ook hebben? Shall we do it in English? Or is someone translating?
I can do it in English. That's not an issue.
So the question is, how does a corporation...
I can do it in English, yeah. What were you discussing? I'm curious. Do you have any questions? So. No. We also found out it's not small. It did start out like that because I wasn't here for the whole movie, but in the start of the movie you see this housing group at the Surinameplein building, this old anti-squat building, and this project just is the sort of last in a series of crazy ideas. So it did start like just something that we would do on the side, like the festivals or the permaculture farm that you saw before. This also basically just started with, hey, there's land and there's this new idea. Let's just see how far we get. So we started quite naive, and then at some point you find out, we need 8 million. That's rather a lot.
8 million.
The blonde guy in the movie, that's my boyfriend, he's an economist. So we just said to him, you figure out the money. And from there it's also it's a bit entrepreneuring, because there's no... at the start, right, of the part of it is simple, like a normal house, because we just have 36 houses, so we just need a really big mortgage. That's basically it. Once you start building, it's that's not so difficult. Then you just go to the bank, you say it's a bit weird, but it's also still basically a mortgage. We went to the German bank, they know the model, quite okay. The part before is really difficult because you have to pay the advisors, the architect, the installer advisor, the electrician, constructive advisor. And before you have a building design and a plan ready, basically it costs €500,000 to €700,000. And that's very risky money as well, because maybe I have a beautiful plan, but I cannot find a contractor that wants to build it, then all that money is gone. So that was the most difficult part, and that's why we had to run around for subsidies and loans, and to the province and to the municipality and to investment funds and all those things, and that was really quite difficult. But as soon as you start building, you have the mortgage, and then the contractor can say, we're going over budget. But then also my philosophy was always, I just spend everybody's money as quickly as possible, so that if the project fails, they have like millions into the building already, and then it's basically too big to fail, and it's smart to always finish the construction. But the part before the construction, that is really tricky. Mm-hmm. And that's also something we gave back to the city of Amsterdam, and that's why they set up an investment fund of 50 million, so that if you're now wanting to do this, they just say, okay, here's €500,000, go do your design. So that's a lot easier. And that's also why the groups that came after us can do it quicker and with a lot less stress.
And it is always the case that you hire as a bewoner, as a citizen, and not that you buy. You're part of the. So do you? But a lot of people want to buy their part in the corporation.
Yeah.
So why is it that you hire?
The idea is that you build a house to live in, not to then sell it later and speculate. So basically, hiring in principle is really nice because you have the most flexibility. If you want to move later on, it's good. It's easy. You just quit the rental lease. So renting an apartment is, in that sense, actually quite nice. The only issue is the rent is way too high. But we do feel that rent is more logical as long as it's really cheap than buying a house, because you want a place to live, not per se the building. And speculation, buying and selling, is something that we think is of course driving a lot of the problems that we have. So the idea of the Warren and of these cooperations is basically like you have an association, like with a football team. You have a football association, they have a canteen, you can use the canteen, but it just stays with ownership of the association always. And because the association doesn't want to make a profit, because it's us and not a developer that wants to make a lot of money, the rent that we can ask is really low. And because the ownership always stays with the association and it's legally set up in a way that the association can only do one thing, which is to rent out to inhabitants at the low rate and never to sell. That's legally, we can't sell the land, we can't sell the building, it's impossible. That means that we take the speculation out of the housing market. And that is really interesting, because all I can do is rent. I have very cheap rent. My apartment is, well, cheap for Amsterdam, so it's still 1,200 euros. But
same here, I guess. Maybe also. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit cheaper here. And then of the 1,200 euros, 600 is my retirement, because from the 1,200 euros, 600 goes to maintaining the building, paying off interest, just like costs, but also 600, like if you buy a house, goes to paying off the mortgage that we have as an association to the bank. Now that's not fair if the Warren would keep that, because that's value that I add. So if I ever leave the Warren, I still get 600 for every month that I live there back. And because the Warren can't sell, this will stay like this forever. And basically we've pulled 40 apartments out of the market and out of speculation for perpetual cheap rent. I think that's the biggest innovation. The rest is nice, the sustainability and everything, but the ownership model is the most important thing.
And that's an anti-capitalistic way of doing. Questions? Just ask questions. Of course.
I think the financial construction is very fantastic. So I wonder if is it completely new, or is there maybe other spots in the world?
There's lots of places in Germany, in Switzerland, in Scandinavia. There's lots of places where they do this. In America and the UK, it's much less common, but it also happens. And there they often call it a community land trust. So if you want to Google internationally, then that's the better way than Googling for cooperatives. But it's basically the same thing.
Okay, question over here.
Gewoon in het Nederlands doen? Yes. Oké. Ik had een vraag. Als ik het goed begrijp, dan kopen de bewoners gewoon een deel en dan kunnen zij zelf inrichten, toch?
Je koopt niet een deel, je huurt een deel.
Het. Maar daar was ik ook misschien wel een beetje nieuwsgierig naar. Maar dan heb je dus alleen huuropbrengsten van de bewoners. Maar hoe financier je dan eigenlijk alles weer terug?
So I'll translate your question so that everyone hears it. So your question is, if you understand the business model correctly, then you have rent from the inhabitants, but it's very low, so how do I pay back the mortgage, right? Yeah, and so we calculated the rents that we have to ask to pay back the mortgage. So the 1,200 that I pay is enough to have enough cash to pay the bank back every year. But of course the mortgage goes down. You pay a part of your debt you pay off. And as soon as it goes down, the interest goes down. And that's also why right now I couldn't get my 600 back, but in 15 years I can. And then every year after that we have more and more money available because the interest keeps getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and the payback increases. So the business model is not that we don't get any rent in, but the business model is that we get very little rent in, as little as we need to pay back our debts, but not a penny more. And also that in our Excel, and we thought ahead for the next 80 years, we don't correct for inflation, for example. So we are cheap now, but in 10 years we will be very cheap compared to the market because everyone goes up a couple of % every year. And we don't, because we don't have to make money, we just have to live there.
Nou, groot respect voor wat jullie gedaan hebben. Echt zeer indrukwekkend. Waar ik benieuwd naar ben is, heb je ook nog overwogen contact te leggen met woningcorporaties? Zeg maar, omdat die natuurlijk heel veel kennis hebben. En je een deel van het werk misschien daarmee uit handen had kunnen nemen.
Yeah, so your question is, and thank you for the well wishes, whether we've made contact with social housing corporations, and we did. I work a little bit in sustainable building practices and as a consultant and advisor in that field, so I had some connections, and we made use of those. I had one person that advised me that used to be in the board of an Amsterdam housing corporation for social housing. So that's one connection where I just had him check, because everything you do is new, right? I had never hired an architect. I had never dealt with contractors, especially not at this scale. I had never had to assess the risk of an 8 million project. So all these things, we always asked people in our network that we knew, can you look along and can you see if we're asking the right questions a little bit? Still means you have to do a lot, but then at least you have two brains looking at it. So that's one. And on a very practical level, we also asked, you saw all these mooring poles that we have on the side of the building. And I think it's a nice example. If you want to reuse materials, it's really great in theory, right? It's a nice idea, but the problem is you always can get the materials at the time that you don't need them, and then you have to wait until you can use them. So I had 200 mooring poles that I had to store somewhere for at least a year. And that I also solved via another housing corporation. I just called someone on the board and that I knew via a colleague and said, do you have a parking spot or a project that is delayed or something where I can throw these things down for like a year, maybe a bit more. So they also helped in that sense. So that was for us. With other corporations, you also see that sometimes you can ask a housing a corporation, so for social housing, to give you a bit of the project. So just to say, you're going to develop, give me 10%, and then that will be a co-op. And then we help you with like the design and other things. So they also partner sometimes like that to make it easier.
Question over there. You don't know, well, we
Okay, so how do you manage your time during this project going on? I assume you have like work and life and this project. So how do you manage your time?
We did it poorly. I think you can see me degrading a bit during the the documentary. We basically all just worked normal jobs. So I calculated it in the end because we said, this was a voluntary project, but actually a lot of the work we had to do was quite involuntary. We just couldn't step out at some point anymore. So we said maybe we can see like how much time we spent and if we can get a little bit of compensation from the group. And we didn't want to ask it up front because we said we do this for everyone. But then in hindsight, we said maybe we can get like half a year or a year of free rent for the people that put their time in. So that's also why I know the number. On average, everybody spent 0.2 FTE next to their job on this, and that's for 6 people in the board. So it's basically a full-time job that we shared between us. And what it looked like in practice was first trying to just keep your full-time job, and then at some point I and some other board members started to work a day less, and then use the Fridays and the Tuesday evenings, and very often the weekends if there was a crisis, and not the weekends if it went good, to deal with the project. So a day and a half a week is how we did it. And I think now because the financing is easier. I would estimate that in Amsterdam you can do it in half that time.
Hi, I was wondering, how are you all doing now? Because in the end you see that everybody is almost getting like a burnout. Like, is everybody okay now, or are you still on the board?
Yeah, everyone is good.
Is everybody still on the board, or is there like a completely new
The
board?
board switched, although I actually recently stepped back on because there was still some things with the plumbers and the contractors and whatnot.
Yeah.
So we stepped out for a year. And I think that was, for most people, was just in time. And there was a new board, and they mostly dealt with like maintaining the building as it's in use and dealing with the group and things like that, and the whole development, so the difficult negotiations and things like that were done anyway. So most people are really good, and no worries.
Yeah.
And I think it looks a bit dramatic. It also really was. It was very tiring and tough sometimes, but we did want to show it a little bit. Not to make, hopefully, too negative of a documentary, but also to show sometimes that when you really want to do something different, it can just take a lot of sort of energy to push something through. So it's for a housing project, but also just if you want to make genuine change, sometimes you have to do this for a bit. But we're all very happy and healthy now.
Is there a last question? Yeah.
Hoe ziet nu voor jullie de toekomst uit? Zijn er nog nieuwe projecten? Hoe zijn jullie nu verder gegaan?
Yeah. So you're asking the future and if there's any new projects coming up. My boyfriend doesn't want me to do any projects for the next 2 years. So I'm staying away from that a little bit, but I do voluntary advice for other corporations, just like a couple of evenings every month to help them with whatever they run up against. And in the longer term, but that's, we're trying to also not do too much at once, but our bigger thing would be to see if we can set up an investment fund, because we think not everywhere will the municipality for always be able to step in like this. So we wanted to ask sustainable impact investors and banks and things like that, maybe pension funds, if we can get something like 50 to 100 million in one pot. And then every time you have a project, you can really help them along at the start. So that's the thing we're cautiously exploring at the moment.
And then I'm also curious about the group who didn't get a house. So you were with 100, so you stayed with 50. So what about the other 50s? Are they still your friends, or was there a war?
Yeah. No. So we were already doing festivals and things for a long time. So we had this Facebook group of 100 people. Mm-hmm. Some people, life happened, they moved on, they lived elsewhere. It just happened naturally a bit. And some other people were disappointed, but everybody that stepped in knew from the start there's not so much space. So some are now doing other projects like this. They are the second and the third project. Others have gone to more live outside the city, a bit more in nature. So it's spread out a bit like that, but everyone still meets each other a lot. Yeah.
My last question is, because you said there are students working on a lively city. Is it really so that your project in the neighborhood you are in is very important also for the neighborhood? You're a lively, how do you say? Jullie zijn van betekenis for the neighborhood.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I think so. You see our building. It's messy. It's chaotic. It's really strange how it looks and how it's designed. And I think that's also the group. Like half of us are like me, secretly just have office jobs and are let's say normal, and the other half is artists and really nice creative people. And I think especially for the group that wants to make stuff and create, because we have such cheap rents, they can now also afford to do that instead of the jobs that we reward as society. So people can do what they like, and I think that's translated a lot into, we do movie nights in our house, but then also with all different communities in the neighborhood. We got there's a beach house, no one was using it, so we now have our own strand tent where we can program. So we do a lot for children there. There's lots of things. People can just walk into our house. Like most projects like this, they ask rent for these big communal spaces if people from outside come in, and we just say, can use it. So there's a lot going on, and that is mostly due to the ownership and the finance model, that you get space instead of working 9 to 5 and having to throw all your money at your rent. You can play around a bit, and if it fails, it doesn't matter. So that really helps. Yeah.
Sounds inspiring to me. Is it inspiring for you? Yes? Do you still have a last, because we are just running out of time, last question? No? Well, thank you for being here. Spread the word of the Warren, and thank you very much.
Thank you.